Late Show host Stephen Colbert taped an interview with Texas State Representative James Talarico. He's a Democratic candidate in the Senate primary in Texas. But Colbert says CBS's lawyers stepped in before the interview that they pre-taped could actually air on broadcast television. This all stems from recent threats from the Republican-led Federal Communications Commission.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. Stephen Colbert is under fire once again for daring to tell the truth. CBS, the parent network of The Late Show, informed Colbert at the last minute that he could not air an interview with James Talarico, who is running for the U.S. Senate in Texas. The explanation given by Colbert was that the network didn't want to run afoul of FCC Chairman Brendan Carr, a Trump loyalist who has already tried to cancel Kimmel and failed, and is wielding his position as the nation's top regulator of broadcast content to censor speech that Donald Trump doesn't like. So the interview didn't air on broadcast TV. But since Colbert posted it on YouTube, it has become one of the most watched episodes of The Late Show ever. We had James Talarico on this show recently. I don't know him personally, but we had a great conversation, and I can guarantee that having that man appear on The Late Show does not threaten public safety. He's a former middle school teacher and divinity school graduate. James Talarico was not going to incite violence from The Late Show couch. What we are seeing, though, is the Trump regime in full panic mode. That includes regime enablers like Paramount Global and CBS, which produces The Late Show. And the panic that is setting in is not because the opposition party has developed a compelling resistance strategy, sorry to inform you, but the Democratic Party is not out in front on this. The reason the regime and its enablers are acting so paranoid is that the American people have had it. The resistance is growing in 1,000 places at once. It's organic. It's everywhere. It's you. It's me. It's a million little things punctuated by the occasional shockwave, like the extraordinary bravery of the resistors in Minneapolis. I asked my friend Maria Stephan to help explain the kind of resistance movement we're seeing emerge. Maria is an expert on civil disobedience and noncompliance. She has worked around the world leading and coaching pro-democracy movements. Her resume includes time at the State Department, the U.S. Institute of Peace, the International Center on Nonviolent Conflict, and NATO. Maria was also recently on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, where she gave an all-too-brief overview of what civil resistance can achieve. I wanted to give Maria the time this topic deserves, so this is a two-parter. The second half is over on my Substack page. Here's me and Maria Stephan. Maria, you spent your career deployed to far-flung places, researching authoritarian governments and democratic backsliding. You were in Kabul. Did you ever imagine you would be researching that same phenomenon here in the United States?
Yeah, well, thanks, Ken. And yes, I've spent 25 years or so studying and working with movements all around the world that have challenged military occupations and authoritarian regimes. And, everything from, movements in Serbia and Ukraine to movements in Zimbabwe, Sudan, Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, and trying to better understand when and why movements challenging authoritarian regimes succeed. And, when it comes to the United States, on the one hand, I've been deeply inspired by the movements in this country that have challenged authoritarianism on the subnational level. So think about our civil rights movement, which was challenging a Jim Crow system, a racial authoritarian system that was, anchored in southern states. And they used powerful strategies of, bus boycotts, lunch counter sit-ins, strikes, freedom rides, marches. So on the one hand, I've always deeply appreciated and respected that history of resisting that type of authoritarianism in the United States. And to answer your question, I never anticipated the speed with which there would be an authoritarian breakthrough at the federal level. and the speed with which democracy would be backsliding in this country. And so just like how fast it's been happening, how quickly the guardrails have come down, the speed with which executive power is being expanded, consolidated, the way in which federal law enforcement is becoming essentially a paramilitary force in this country, the power of the state being used to target dissent and opposition. So it's like the politics of retribution and revenge have become like federal government policy at this point. So that was certainly not anticipated. And so now it's like, so all the work of studying authoritarian dynamics and the authoritarian playbook in other contexts, in our country, in our context, but also around the world. And then importantly, like, what does it take to effectively counter these authoritarian movements and regimes? And so, yes.
We'll get to that. I definitely want your advice, your insight, your wisdom on how we respond to it. But I'm wondering if for you, there was a tipping point. It seems like not very long ago, we were arguing about whether we were on the road to fascism or not. But the scales have come off of a lot of our eyes in the past year. We're just a year into the second Trump term. Was there a moment where you realized, oh my gosh, this resembles what I have spent my lifetime studying abroad?
I mean, certainly the attempted insurrection and coup on January 6th, so the first administration, an attempt to overturn the results of the election, was classic autocrat activity. Do whatever it takes to stay in power and attempt to undermine the will of voters. So that was such a breakthrough moment of understanding what this leader and regime were capable of doing was very clear in that moment. But then, in the second administration, I think just the systematic way in which the Department of Justice immediately was targeting universities, law firms, civil society organizations, just like very targeted, politicized investigations. Then it was like, oh yeah, this is their game. And then we saw, ICE and Border Patrol deploy to cities across the country where it was like, oh, this is not about, about arresting and deporting criminals. This is about terrorizing communities and asserting control in that way. And then, of course, we saw with the deployment of the National Guard to cities across the country against the will of locally elected leaders. And it was very clear, this is not about law and order. This is about an abuse of power. This isn't about, and it was a manipulation of our men and women in uniform. And so again, this is what autocrats do. They try to militarize our communities as kind of a flex. And then to try to, manipulate, for example, to manipulate election results or to influence people, to make people too fearful to vote. So it's this intimidation game that's become institutionalized that is just striking. So all of these like warning bells were just so loud and clear. And then again, the same insinuation that, if the party in power does not win elections in the midterms or in 2028, they will not respect the results. It's so clear. The writing is on the wall. So yeah, this is what autocrats, this is their playbook, what they do all around the world.
I've felt this pressure for years to constantly replace clothes as trends change or seasons shift, especially with outerwear and layers. Stuff that looks fine at first, but once you actually rely on it, cold mornings, long days, travel, it just doesn't hold up. And that's frustrating. This time of year, a good hoodie is essential. It's something you reach for over and over again. But finding one that's genuinely warm, comfortable, and built to last isn't easy. That's why I wear American Giant. Their classic full zip hoodie feels different the moment you put it on. The fabric has real weight to it. The construction is solid. It's made with the assumption that you're actually going to live in it, not just wear it a few times and move on. and it's built to last a lifetime. Slate magazine famously called it the greatest hoodie ever made, and that reputation is earned. From the cotton to the zipper, it's made right here in the USA. What I appreciate most about American Giant is the quality and durability. Every detail feels intentional. The heavyweight fleece, the side panels that give you mobility, the reinforced elbows, the double-lined hood. It has a clean fit that works whether you're traveling, working, or just trying to stay warm. And the more you wear it, the better it gets. Softer, more comfortable, more yours. American Giant obsesses over the details, and they're deeply committed to the communities that make their products. Everything is made in America, no exceptions. They make staples that are anything but basic, like the premium Slub Crew tee and the No BS high-rise and slim roughneck pants featured in Giant magazine. For me, clothing quality matters more than just looking good. I want pieces I can count on year after year. American Giant delivers that, and you feel the difference every time you put it on. This season, snag the hoodie that will bring you comfort for life, the American Giant Classic Full Zip, and save 20% off your first order at AmericanGiant.com when you use code KEN at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at AmericanGiant.com, code KEN. It's Ken Harbaugh with a quick break to tell you about something new coming to the MeidasTouch network. Meidas Defense, serious coverage of the military, national security, and real threats at home and abroad. No spin, no talking points, just expert voices and on-the-ground reporting. Check out Meidas Defense, coming soon to the MeidasTouch network. I want to test this theory with you, which is an observation of mine that has been growing over the past few years, that the reason this happened so quickly and took so many people by surprise is that the guardrails we depended on, the ones that you've talked about being dismantled by the Trump regime, it turns out many of them weren't enshrined in law. They certainly weren't buttressed by institutional power or backbone. They were norms.
Yes.
They were traditions.
Yeah.
And when you have a regime that doesn't care about norms or traditions, much less has any sense of shame about obliterating them, it turns out our system is really, really fragile.
It's incredibly fragile. Democracy is fragile. And, and that's why also, when this administration came back into power, like, what was their first move? It was to fire thousands of civil servants, professionals.
And the JAGs, let's add that.
And the JAGs and the special inspectors who are responsible for, over monitoring and pushing back against fraud and corruption. So get rid of the monitors, the inspectors generals, and basically get rid of anyone who's not loyal. And once you do that, and you just put in power kind of yes men who are willing to go along with absolutely anything. And so, so that happened. That was like one of the first moves, right? And then you can then all the federal agencies become at the whim of the autocrat trying to exert and consolidate power. But you're right. I mean, so much of democracy is about norms, but it also highlights too that we are the guarantors of those norms and institutions, that it's fragile, and what we do together to uphold those norms, to enforce them, is really important, especially in this moment. We do need the institutions. We need elections. We need the courts. We need the litigation, all that critically important. But we also know from the research that unless we organize outside of those institutions and form broad-based movements that use all these different tactics, we don't have a strong chance of stopping backsliding. So we have to be able to organize within those institutions, but then to organize powerful kind of people power outside those institutions.
I was hoping you would take us there, because I would love your take on the moment we're in right now, like this week. Do you think the regime has overreached? You look at the reaction that their actions in Minneapolis have provoked, their actions elsewhere, especially on immigration, have provoked, and it seems like there is this long overdue awakening, and that finally the ultimate democratic antibody, the anger of the voting public, the anger of the people with whose consent the government operates, that is finally being expressed. And the Trump regime seems really afraid of the American people right now.
Yes. I think we've seen profound backfire to federal abuses of power, to political violence, to repression. You think, I mean, the Minnesotans have showed us like what happens when people come together across community, across sector, across pillar, across ideology. They stand up for each other in community. So when thousands of federal agents were, deployed across Minneapolis and the Twin Cities, they were everywhere. And the communities, they responded. They formed neighborhood patrols. They were organizing Know Your Rights campaigns. They set up mutual aid to be able to take care of terrorized neighbors. And then in the freezing cold, minus 15-degree weather, you had clergy coming out and saying enough is enough, ICE out. And then you had the tragic state killings, first of Renee Good and then of Alex Pretty. And that, the response to those state killings was people, again, showing up, protesting, and then organizing a day-long shutdown. So they had an economic shutdown on January the 23rd, and it involved labor unions. It involved faith organizations, immigrant right groups, other indivisible civic organizations, and they all came together and said, we're not going to work. We're not going to school. We're not going to engage in economic activity. And it was incredibly powerful. And I think just seeing how the communities have come together, how they've sustained their mobilization and their pushback and their consistent message, ICE out, and accountability for those responsible for these killings, it's been powerful. And that's how it's done. When people organize and make the political violence and repression backfire, because they are paying a political price now. People are speaking out against these killings who were maybe quiet before. You have suburban moms who are organizing carpools now. You have clergy who are, organizing civil disobedience. So people are taking action together, and I think, really powerful ways now. And they're sending a message that if you're going to take our neighbors, you're going to have to go through us first. And that's becoming really hard.
That was part one of my conversation with Maria Stephan. Check out part two on the Ken Harbaugh Show Substack page, where we talk about the importance of defections, of making sure there are avenues for the resistance to bring into its ranks former supporters of the regime. Throughout the history of civil resistance movements, that has always been a key factor in their success. See you over on Substack. Thanks for the support.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.